Jai Hind and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. As you can see, I have with me Mr. Sanjay Dixit on this great day when the Jaipur Dialogues itself crosses 800,000 subscribers. Sir, firstly, congratulations. Big achievement. Closing into the 1 million mark.
Thank you, Adi. Thank you very much. It's all because of the support of people like you and your followers. We are indeed closing in. Hopefully, we'll do it soon.
Absolutely, sir. My best wishes and shower some love this side as well so that people like us can also do a little bit in the game.
Well, you just begun, so I'm sure you will do well in future.
Absolutely, sir. Sir, today's subject is very interesting because I've been trying to analyze the narratives which are there, and I've done a couple of shows on this on my channel as well. The main aspect of a narrative today we see is as we grow in our stature, we will have more of these narrative attacks. Today, what we see is not an international narrative attack that we should be that much worried about, but the societal difference which is coming out within India, sir. Firstly, how do you look at this entire game going forward, sir?
No, no, you have to define for me. What do you mean by societal difference?
So first and foremost, see, let's figure out. The Hindu-Muslim aspect has been propagated to a large extent. You've got a whole lot of communities that are now starting up. The Khalistan issue is coming up. There are so many things that have suddenly risen up that were not there before. So is this something
I
that
don't
is
agree
being
with you.
done, or, sir?
I don't agree with you in that. These aspects have been there for as long as I can remember. You mentioned about the Khalistan issue. The Khalistan issue was started by the British right in the 1880s, and it has been our inability to grasp that divide that was started by the British, and as usual, as we do in India, to try to paper it over and try not to confront it and try and appease the hardliners. And that is the reason that's why you suddenly find that these hardline elements can get together and create trouble. If you had faced up to it, if you had honestly tried to come to grips with it, if you had tried to honestly isolate forces like the SGPC. What is SGPC? SGPC is a British creation. What is SGPC? It is a continuation of the Tat Khalsa movement that was started in the 1878. It's by the British. There was a Sanatan Khalsa movement, and to counter that, the British propagated, or rather supported. There was a nascent, almost insignificant, unheard of Tat Khalsa movement that used to be there, that was supported by the British. They were the ones who brought a guy called Ernest Trump from Germany to study all the Sikh scriptures and to create differences and to bring out a theory that the Sikhism is separate from Sanatan Dharma.
Yes.
The fellow was honest, so he said that there is no way that you can say at any point of time that any of the Sikh scriptures do not have roots in the Sanatan Dharmas or in the Vedas. They all come from Vedas. In fact, Guru Nanak was a Bedi. Bedi is what? From Vedas. Bedi. So when he came to that conclusion, he was thrown out. And then another guy who was a civil servant, because civil servants like us, we are past masters in creating division and creating these problems. So they chose a civil servant whose name was Arthur Macauliffe. And the Macauliffe, of course, he had nothing to do with academic honesty. So he not only pilfered things, he vandalized the scriptures, he developed certain disciples of his who completely vandalized these scriptures, who took things out of context, who misinterpreted things. Today, Jaipur Dialogues is at the forefront of exposing those deliberate fault lines that were created by actually not just vandalizing scriptures, but creating false scriptures.
New scriptures. Hmm.
And then the British aided it further by creating a separate Sikh identity and reserving agriculture and military for them. They started recruiting Sikhs with the what is called the five kakars. Now, our friend Puneet Sani has even brought out evidence that what is called the five kakars or the five basic elements, they never existed. It used to be five hathiars, as were as were worn by Durga ji.
Hmm, hmm,
Durga ji used to carry those five hathiars, and since Guru Gobind Singh ji was a Shakti Upasak, he was a Shakt basically. Then that was created again by Macauliffe. Macauliffe got this Khan Singh Nabha and this other guy, Bhai Veer Singh,
hmm.
and they created false scriptures. I wouldn't use the term falsified because falsified means doing an exercise in proving something wrong. No, they didn't do that. They simply created false idioms, they simply created falsehoods, and those falsehoods they called, and then the British sanctified it. The British brought in what is called the Punjab Land Alienation Act 2000, in which they said that there are agricultural classes, and they said, okay, Jat Sikhs are the only agricultural classes. And so that the original uh, vanguards of the Sikhs, those Khatris, after all the gurus were Khatris,
Patrice.
they were left out in the cold. Then they created what is called the separate marriage. Then they promoted takeover of the gurdwaras. All these things were done by the British, and then they created this SGPC. And of course, our great Mahatma Gandhi, as was his wont, he would succumb to every such blackmail, and he supported this takeover of gurdwaras. And then 1925 SGPC, and after that the SGPC has been almost universally been recognized as the bearer of the Sikh faith, which it is not.
Okay.
So it is wrong to say that it is happening today. It happened long time back. We slept over it. So today, when it started resurfacing, at least we have an environment today where we can actually try and bring out the truth. So that is the question about Khalistan. The entire Khalistan narrative is false, and you can prove it very easily. It is
Very.
not so difficult because uh, unlike Islam, the roots are very much in the Sanatan, and it doesn't take uh, much brains to actually prove it. You just
Indeed, sir.
need some very basic idea about it to be able to prove it. But the government, previous governments as well as the present government, they don't want to touch the narrative. They only want to doctor or they only want to treat the symptoms. They do not want to treat the root cause. That is the problem.
Indeed, and that's. I mean, thank you so much because I love the way that you brought this out because one of the biggest things that we see today, and you've kind of hinted on this, is today because there's a discussion. We are aware of these subjects and they come to as a surprise to us. Oh, is this also another issue? Is this also another issue? Because the popular narrative being that all these issues have been resolved, and the six the Punjab militancy got over and the issue was done with. But of course, there is always a seeding, uh, something that has been on and which is being capitalized today, sir. But the interesting thing that I want to ask you, and you had a conversation with Salvatore Barbon some time ago as well. I was very interested in that because that's a twist of narrative through data, and we've seen this happening again and again, sir. Now, as we go forward towards the 2024 elections, sir, do you think this is going to be more factual based or rather than a fictitious base, which was the previous time narrative that we saw? Because the previous time narratives were stories built out of certain laws and this and that. Today, it's about demeaning. I mean, if I may, I don't have a better word to put at it, but it's about the demeaning the culture and the situation in the country. How do you kind of place these two differences, and what do you see coming out of it in the future?
As you mentioned Salvatore. Salvatore has a take that it is basically all the data is emanating from us, and the people who are compiling the data, they are completely innocent. Well, I would say, and in fact, I was trying to get him onto that. He wasn't coming around to that fact. Is till right in the end when he did admit that there is a
Institutional
kind of
bias.
congruence between the uh, anti-Semitics and the anti-Hindu, that he
So,
admitted right in the end. But in the beginning, when I was trying to tell him that there is actually a bias within these rating agencies, and of which I had given him some evidence also, particularly with respect to VDEM, because VDEM, the people who are operating VDEM, a large number of them are Pakistanis.
yep,
You know that. So a large
absolutely.
number of them Pakistanis, and Pakistani, I wouldn't treat anyone with a Pakistani origin as a fully innocent, bar a few noble exceptions.
Hmm.
And these people are also allied to ISI funded organizations. So to say that okay, they are fully innocent, but it is our anti-India intellectuals that feed them. They are the only ones who are in the wrong. After all, who selects them? That is also, and how you select them. What are your selection methods?
Hmm.
And the beauty is in twisting the data, is in doctoring the sample. As
Hmm.
simple as that. Uh, so that is as far as that is concerned. But he also had this point that there is a very large section of anti-India intellectuals, and those anti-India intellectuals have actually um, taken all their feed from those anti-India, anti-Hindu narratives that were created right from the 19th century itself. And we have had a lot of talks about it. It is fairly well documented. You can see this in the number of articles and books that we have a compilation of on the Jaipur Dialogues website. That right from the time of James Mill, who wrote the first history of India without ever visiting India,
From India.
from the data that was supplied to him, was the material that was supplied to him by the East India Company, and also because in 1813 the British Parliament changed the charter of the East India Company to include missionary activities against the wishes of the East India Company, by
East
the
India.
way. And that ultimately led to what is called the Macaulayan intervention, the Macaulay system of education, in which we had willing accomplices like Raja Ram Mohan Roy and other people. We had willing accomplices. They are quoted as some kind of progressive Indians who had our welfare at heart, and they promoted that welfare by rubbishing their own heritage, rubbishing their own language as backward. The same Sanskrit was rubbished as backward, which the earlier English romantics, and that I think is starting from William Jones, Sir William
Hmm.
Jones. And
Hmm.
they found it to be a great language, and because it was so great, and because it was so powerful and so much more advanced than the European languages, that they found it necessary to trace its origins back to Europe and invent an Aryan invasion theory. That was basically because they found this Sanskrit to be too profound, too great, and they also managed to steal a lot of science and maths from India. The Jesuit theft is now pretty well documented. We all know that. And then they built those narratives the Aryan invasion theory, then they created those divides. I just mentioned to you about how they created the divides between the Sikhs and the Hindus. Similarly, they created the narrative about Dravidians and Aryans being separate races and things of those kinds. We have a lot of these talks on the Jaipur dialogues, how they created that,
You told
and
that,
they
yes.
basically what is called the mosaic ethnography, the Moses ethnography of Ham, Shem, and Japheth, the three races. And that race theory was created and planted over India, the remnants of which you see even today in places like Harvard are doing critical race theory and then
Yeah,
trying to impose it over what they call is critical caste theory, and
Hastin.
they divide into races. They use their hegemonic positions to do that. So it's all been very old story. Jawaharlal Nehru, I fault him because he was not intellectually equipped to actually understand that. People who understood it, Swami Vivekanand, Maharshi Aurobindo, even some notables like Madan Mohan Malviya, even Purushottam Das Tandon, who understood this, they were sidelined by Nehru. And Nehru was foisted upon India by the great man called Mahatma Gandhi, who was principally responsible, according to me, for giving rise to militant Islam in India, because he played a second fiddle to a most regressive movement called the Khilafat movement.
Khilafat.
What we call the non cooperation movement, if you read my book, if you haven't, I have documented it. What we call the non cooperation movement, we attribute it to Gandhi. That non cooperation movement was actually started by the committee. And that Khilafat committee actually started it on the 1st August 1920.
Hmm.
Congress joined it through a resolution of, I think, the CWC on 12th of September 1920. So that is the story, or that is the reality, that a man whom we credit with leading the independence movement of India actually hooked himself to a movement that was started to deny independence to the imperial Osmanian Empire. So that is how
That's
things are built. But then the leftists took it upon themselves to credit everything to Gandhi, because they found in Gandhi a very useful person, by exalting whom they could keep the real spirit of the Sanatan Dharma extinguished. That is my basic premise.
so what you're saying is all these years, all these terrible things that have been done in our history are today bearing fruit, and it's coming out in front of us in a combined aspect where, which was, as you said, we've been sleeping and brushing it over. But today the time is kind of telling us that it's in front of us. Which brings me to my next question, sir. Is this also a part, of course, this is all very sad. And when you see this in India, when you see this happening around us, it's not something that any Indian would want to see. Uh, but do you also see this as a healthy part of societal correction overall? Because any correction in any society that we've seen which has amalgamated or pushed back its history to a certain extent has come to a point where the discussion does come to a breaking point before it kind of resolves itself. So, do you see this as a correction?
Yes, I think the sunlight is the best disinfectant. Oh, I think that's a cliche, but then
Mm,
it has also a very important message.
mm,
And nothing better than telling the truth. Ultimately, you remember that South Africa also, who had suffered so much under the uh, white man, they also brought out what is called a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, because they felt
Correct.
that telling the truth is most important. In
Mm.
India, what we did was that we hid away the truth, and then we tried to glorify the Islamic rule, we tried to glorify the Western achievements, and then we try to belittle everything. We said that, okay, the Hindu religion is nothing but prejudices and superstitions and rituals. These are the words of our first prime minister.
Indeed.
So when you have this kind of a discourse going forward, then what are you doing to the populace? You are actually breeding in them a certain inferiority complex. And that
Certainly.
inferiority complex comes through, and it creates a conflict within. First, it creates a conflict within the Hindu society. And then slowly they realize that they are being shortchanged, then they start reacting. In
Mm.
fact, the BJP is the beneficiary of that reaction. But having benefited from that reaction, they also thought, okay, okay, let it mm, carry on at its own pace. We don't need to really assist in decoding all the wrongs that have been done. It's only because of the internet, it is only because of the sustained pressure by the social media. I think Jaipur Dialogues can take a little bit of that credit too, because we
Mm.
have sustained that pressure. That now they are talking, at last, they are talking about correcting the
History.
history as it is taught.
Mm.
And if not exactly of correcting the historical wrongs, but then they have at least come around to talking about correcting the history as it is taught. So, small gain. And as far as that point that you talked about, the Hindu Muslim divide, Hindus are not to be blamed for it, because I have documented it, and I have even put into public domain the very basis of Hanafi Islam in India. Hanafi is the Sunni sect
Mm.
uh, that is actually prevalent in India. It's about 99% of the Sunni Islam in India. About 1% is what we call Ahle Hadith. And their fundamental document is Fatawa Alamgiri, which we have translated into Hindi, and one of the major volumes, volume 3, which actually talks about the relationship between the Muslims and the others. It's called the Kitab al Jihad. We have put it in public domain. Anybody can go and check. So this we are talking about uh, 17th century. This
Mm.
document was compiled in the 17th century, and this document has excerpts from most of the most influential books of Sunni Islam, such as the Hidayah, and it clearly spells out that the Hindus, the natives of this land, they are to be despised, they are to be kept away, they are not supposed to be mixed up with. All these things are written there.
Mm.
And it is basically the Naqshbandi Sufis who were in the sect of what we call the tariqa of Sheikh Ahmad Sarhindi. So they are the ones who created this trope. In fact, I have also on Twitter, I have shared a number of times. I think I will also probably compile those letters of Sheikh Ahmad Sarhindi to his various disciples, which clearly say that you should not mix up with the kafirs, because if you mix up with kafirs, then your iman may be affected, because that iman is so fragile that it cannot stand the sunlight. It will just break up if it comes into contact with any rationality. If it comes into contact with any spirituality, it has a great danger of exploding. So he has. specifically commended this. He was the one who actually rationalized and sanctified what is called cow slaughter, because for him it was very important to keep humiliating the kafir. All this is documented. So, what are we talking of societal harmony? Which societal harmony we are talking about? Whenever these people have talked about societal harmony, I am talking about, when I say these people, that means the leaders of Islam. The leaders of Islam are not political leaders. Let's be clear about it. The leaders
Right.
of Islam are only their muftis and maulanas. That is how the society is structured. You can read Dr. Ambedkar, he'll tell you that. He says that mm, the municipal law doesn't exist for them. Whatever exists for them is the religious law, the Shariat. So it is the experts of Sharias, the Muhaddis, the Mufti, they are the leaders for them. And their leaders have always said this in one voice. And whenever anybody has tried to paper over it, it is only when he's talking to the Hindus, like Sayyid Ahmad Khan used to do. When he used to talk to Hindus, he used to have a different take. And then he used to address his own people. Then he would say very clearly that we are different. We are separate nation. We are Ummah. Who brought this concept of the two nation theory? It's there right from the time of the Prophet. Who is that idiot that says that it was articulated by Muhammad Ali Jinnah? It is there in the book. And it is very, very clearly stated by Sarhindi. It is there in Fatawa Alamgiri. It was the disciple of the son of Shah Abdul Rahim, who was the father of, who was the compiler of Fatawa Alamgiri, and son and father of Shah Waliullah. All these people who are revered as the greatest of Islamic leaders all said this. So why do you say that there is societal disharmony? It has always been there. It is only people like Gandhi who tried to disable the Hindu society and to try to pull wool over their eyes so that they would not see this.
Mm.
Anybody who has had eyes and could clearly see through the clutter has always known this. So I have a fundamental difference of opinion over this configuration that you put on this topic, that the societal differences are increasing. The societal differences have always been there because Islam and Christianity, they preach exclusion. They preach exclusive claims to truth. They have, they say that their truth is the only truth.
Only truth.
Therefore, that is a fundamental difference between the Hindus and these people, because Hindus would say that the truth is universal. These people, truth is not universal. For them, truth is purely sectarian.
It's a quest for knowledge
That's
and it's a
that's
quest
the
for
that's the fundamental. That's the very fundamental. So how can you have a secular Islam? You can't have it. Anybody who says that Islam is secular, the Islam can be secular, is lying through his teeth. Why don't you look at the constitutions of the 57 Islamic countries?
indeed. And so I know you have to rush, but 1.5 minutes exactly on a little bit of an insight on how we as the society could, uh, you know, I won't say bring about a difference, but protect ourselves, if I may, or to understand what's happening rather more clearly, rather than looking at what is available on the internet, because most of it is all twisted around with a certain pinch of masala and salt and namak and all that stuff to bring about a certain picture that we understand today. So, what can a society do to kind of go forward from this point of time to develop?
Truth. Find out the truth. And you can find it out from the from the originals. You don't have to go about looking for it in translations or in interpretations. Today, in the era of internet, you can actually go to the real documents. If you want to understand about Shariat, then you can actually go to the original commentaries written by people like Ibn Qasir. The Tafsir Ibn Qasir is available. So you read what the people like Ibn Qasir say about the certain verses that sometimes are paraded as peaceful verses. You see what people like Maududi have said about them. And it's all available. It's all freely available on the internet. So read and find out the truth. Find out the truth about these missionaries. Find out the truth about these narratives. And if
Most
you have
important.
difficulty in finding it out, all you need to do is to visit the Jaipur Dialogues website. I think you will find most resources there. And if not, find those resources, you'll find references to those resources.
Indeed, most importantly, sir, because I think, and you've brought it out very nicely, and thank you for actually putting a historical aspect to this discussion. Because rather than talking about the present, which is a fruit of a seed planted many years ago, so the historical understanding of the problem today that we see in front of us is most critical. Because if you don't know that, how do we correct something which is happening in front of us at all? There's just no possibility. We can keep firing guns at each other in terms of dialogues and in terms of all that stuff, but it won't make a damn of a difference. And the final aspect that you brought about read and truth, I think it's a fundamental thing. So it's something that I think our society has missed for a little bit in terms of reading the right things. If I may just be humbly adding to what you said. Sir, thank you so much. It's always a delight talking to you. Congratulations once again on achieving this great milestone. Hoping for a faster approach towards the million mark and further on after that, sir. Keep doing that
Thank you,
great job.
Ali. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
It's
Thank
always
you
a
so much
pleasure to
for
be with
joining,
you.
sir. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind, Vande Mataram.